During my Inktober or Tracktober project, I painted 3 illustrations inspired by tarot cards. These are now pages in the Dracula art scene, but also separate tarot card art prints, and I thought that would make for a great opportunity to show my entire process, from references to painting and then digital edits and print prep. The first card shows Dracula himself, and of course there's one perfect tarot card to go with him. I used a 3D zine as reference, and will show more of the making of process for these once we get to the other 2 cards, to get that red light on his face exactly how I imagined it. These 3 tarot cards are supposed to bridge the gap between the simple character illustrations in gouache and the fully rendered acrylic paintings like the cover. So I used acrylics to get brighter, intenser colors than gouache and to give me more room for layering and details. In my previous Inktober art vlog I did show the beginning stages of this drawing if you'd like to take another look. I wanted these to be a bit surreal, a bit weird and trippy in their color palette and lighting choices. That's why the 3D came in handy, as I really wanted some intense, colorful light options that I would have trouble creating in real life at home. I also have a free skull model that I textured with a material more glossy than actual bone would be, to give it also a more surreal feel. To reference the other acrylic paintings in this series of Dracula art, the color palette uses similar paints. This card here focuses on cadmium red light and alizarin crimson, and otherwise a very simple black and white palette. I brought in some of my favorite subtle shading color, small hue, to add a cooler tint to some of the shadows. And there's burnt umber in Dracula's doublet as well. I've always loved tarot art, even collected decks when I was younger, and kind of want to start collecting them again. There's also the tarot card inspired character art in the game Dragon Age Inquisition, which forever rewired my brain. But I deliberately left out any of those design elements, the geometric shapes and embellishments that make the Dragon Age style so distinctive, and try to find my own language here. As you can see, this illustration took me longer than the typical 1 drawing a day challenge timeframe, so I just continued chipping away at it while also finishing daily drawings for Tracktober. The framing device I leaned on were windows. The scene is titled Windows into Dracula, often showing characters looking through windows, into mirrors or through portholes, so the shapes in the background of Dracula here are inspired by windows and doors in the Basler Münster, the large church in my hometown in Switzerland, and specifically its crypt with some extra spiky shape language to make it more appropriate for a vampire. There's a little voice inside my head whispering, "Do a full tarot deck, it will be amazing and so much fun and you'll learn so much." But that's probably for the distant future. While I'd love to make my own unique deck, or at least a set of the major arcana one day, I still have so much to learn before I feel equipped to tackle such a large series of paintings. I consider these 3 to be more of a print trio with a tarot card concept instead of proper tarot cards. I've been using a set of synthetic brushes by Cherry Q Art. A random discovery that I was really worried about at first because of the cheap price, but they've been amazing. The pointed rounds hold different shapes really well, and you can see how I can push and mold them into small flats to paint precise edges, lines, and then seamlessly go back to soft blending. Since these tarot illustrations are so small, I also brought out my workhorse brush, the Da Vinci Forte in size 0. I have to admit that I keep destroying these, especially with how much I've been painting lately, but the destroyed brushes still work for color mixing, color blending, embellishing prints, and rougher textures. I never throw brushes away. For creating prints, I usually scan my smaller paintings, while for larger paintings or anything on canvas or panel, I go with photographs. Scans of even large acrylic paintings on paper work well, as they are just bendy and resilient enough to be scanned in multiple parts. Scanning them just turns out crisper for me, which might just be because I don't have a professional photography setup. My scanner is an absolute workhorse, an Epson V330 that I've been using for half a decade. Newer models are less bulky, but I'm satisfied with the scan quality of this, usually going for 400 or 600 dpi so that I have a high resolution scan even if all the prints are 300 dpi. In the past I would print my art at home, but I found that constant printer maintenance, importing ink and often even paper from abroad, or at least mainland Korea, was a constant hassle, and I much prefer ordering small batches from a printing company I, at this point, trust and know well. It took me a while to finally get to the other two cards. Here I'm creating the reference material. I used DAZ 3D, which is amazing for character references in particular, though I prefer Blender for architecture and overall more complex scenes. DAZ 3D can be very intimidating at first, but just using it like one of those wooden joint tools but with detailed textures is really all I do. Here I placed a single strong yellow spotlight and then angled the camera upwards, moving the hands around to get a rough approximation of the pose I wanted. My laptop really struggles with rendering, so I usually do this in the background while finishing up other work and just check if the image looks okay and if it's going in the right direction, just letting it do its thing for 20 or 30 minutes. Despite what I thought when I first started to use DAZ, you don't actually have to buy all these models. The base figures or characters are included in the free download, and I just kept checking their weekly freebies section in the store to slowly build up my collection over the last year or so. All I personally needed was one long hairstyle and one short hairstyle to see how light behaves on the overall shapes. And at one point I did impulse buy a set of armor and weapons when they were on sale. It pays off to wait for those 80% or even 90% discounts that happen randomly or on days like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and to just be patient until then. Often I really just use the basic shirt included with the program in a color that fits the costume I want the character to wear, so I can get basic lighting information from that. There's also a bit of an uncanny valley effect to the models, and I don't usually stick very closely to their facial features. But for these more surreal tarot illustrations, they actually worked really well. 3D is especially helpful when having multiple characters in a scene with cohesive lighting. I can always take pictures of myself under a lamp or two for a single portrait, but multiples require more of a setup and effort, so I like to use 3D for scenes like Jonathan and Mina Harker here. As you can see, the actual faces I painted then still looked quite different from the models. I really just needed a starting point and then improvised from there. And the time it took to pose the models, see what camera angle or light works best, and then render those was worth it for the simple reference. Lucy's tarot card is the world, and this is where I took some liberties with actual tarot card meanings. Yes, Lucy's story marks the end of a cycle and brings all the other characters to one single point, where they are now fully aware that they are in a vampire horror story and take on the task to defeat Dracula. But I also wanted the illustration to work as Lucy, meaning the world, to so many of the characters who love her, including her close friend Mina, and how that then unites them all. Her colors are very soft, there's no black, and while I went with an eerie vampire eye effect towards the end, I really wanted this card to just be beautiful color-wise. The blue is small hue again, and I played around with her facial expression for quite a long time, repainting and making small adjustments to see if I could capture despair and beauty and a bit of horror all at the same time. Jonathan and Mina are the tarot card for the lovers. It's a bit on the nose since, well, they are engaged and later in the story married, but I really wanted to feature their love story as a key illustration. In a lot of adaptations, all the romantic focus is somehow put on Dracula and his victims, which feels very different from the more monstrous compulsion in the book. The color palette here is more alizarin crimson hue, smalt hue, burnt and raw umber, and the grey tones mixed from that. But I loved adding the rosy pink window frame to change the mood of the color palette completely. Let me know if you have any questions about the digital process, be it 3D references or scanning or print prep, and I'd be happy to go into more detail in future videos. Now, the editing process is different depending on the material I used for the painting. Watercolors or anything more sketchy with visible white paper may require masking or some texture cleanup, while acrylics are pretty straightforward and I mostly have to remove dust with the copy stamp or spot healing tool. I had a Wacom Intuos tablet in the past, but that was over a decade old and at some point the cable just stopped working, so I switched to this Huion tablet. I'm not a digital artist, and while I sketch in Photoshop occasionally, I don't do heavy-duty painting. So I can only judge this tablet for what I'm using it for. Precise corrections of my traditional art, using painterly brushes and the stamp tool, as well as creating sticker outlines in vector-based programs and similar graphic-related tasks. The hotkey buttons on this tablet are really handy, though I mostly just use 3 or 4 of them, and I have Alt on one of the pen's buttons. For print files, the resolution stays high and my color edits lift some of the midtones and blacks. That's from experience with the same printing company over and over again, and where test prints might come in handy if you print for the first time. I know that blacks can turn out too flat, that light blues often turn out too saturated, little quirks like that, and I can correct for them ahead of time. The stamp tool set to a low opacity or medium opacity is also great for geometric objects, like the window frame here, holding down Shift for straight lines to clean up my acrylic painting this way. I often add test prints to my orders when I have to reprint something else, so here I actually made a couple tarot card tests to see how they look at 2 different sizes. By the way, while I added text here in Photoshop, that was just to get an impression of how it looks with the illustration. I then redo that step in a program better suited for creating crisp text layers. I do that in Affinity Publisher, an alternative to Adobe InDesign that I really like. I've been trying to move away from Adobe as a lot of the recent direction announcements, especially regarding AI, aren't something I want to be part of. By now the tarot card prints have arrived and I'm really happy with how they look as a set. I've been preparing them for shipping with each of the art scene pre-orders, and they are now also available separately on Etsy and in my own shop. You just saw how long it takes me to paint one of these, so yeah, maybe one day I'll take a long break from client work and tackle a tarot series. I've also made a digital version of the art scene for everyone who prefers ebooks, and that one includes some additional sketches and a look behind the scene. Thank you so much for watching, for the lovely comments and all the support, and I hope to see you in my next art video.